Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to another video on life's challenging philosophy ideas that I think everyone should know. Today, I want us to talk about ethics. We want to talk about human behavior, human contact, especially as it relates to other people. The moment your behavior affects other people, that's ethical area. That's area of morality. To discuss that, I want us to use the ideas of an ancient Greek philosopher called Plato. And for Plato, when trying to understand ethics, he thinks that we should understand an individual. And to understand the individual, we should look at the human soul. Plato thinks that a human being has the body and he also has the soul. You have a body and you have a soul. I think that's an idea that has lived on long from the days of the ancient Greeks in 300 BC, 400 BC to today. So, here's what Plato thinks. That if we understand your soul, then we can understand who you are. Because your soul is what animates your body. Your soul is what gives your body action. And so, in your soul, that's where your ethics is. And Plato has a theory called the theory of soul. And in this theory, he thinks that your soul can be divided into three parts. So I want you to assume that you have a soul. Let's assume your soul is just a block. We can divide that soul into three parts. One part, we'll name it rational element. Then another part, we'll name it the spirited element. And the other part, we'll name it the appetitive element. So you have a soul, and that it has three parts. Three parts, three elements, three characteristics, or three features. And he thinks those three characteristics tells us a lot about your behavior, how you treat other people. I have an illustration here that can help us to look at the human soul. So here is your soul. Assume that is you. And now on top here, and then in between here, and below here. And this is how we have divided your soul. On the top part, we are calling it the rational element. And then the middle part, we are calling it the spirited element. And then the lower part, we are calling the appetitive element. And so Plato says that those three parts actually can tell us what your behavior, your attitude in society, or how you relate to other people. He thinks that those three parts, the rational element is the thinking side aspect of your soul. It helps you to behave well, to reason before you do things, and to always be calculative. It's the area where there's wisdom, where you seek truth, where you seek the good. It's the place that has your guidance. Then the spirited element is your emotional, is your passionate. It's associated with honor, courage, and seeking to action. And then your appetitive element. This is the lower part that's more desiring of basic physical needs and pleasure. It's located in the abdomen, as you saw from the picture. It's an area where it's an aspect of your soul that seeks pleasure, seeks food, drinks, sex, money, and material things. Now, how this soul is balanced out, how the rational element, how the spirited element and the appetitive element balances out in your soul really matters on what kind of person you are. If you're a person who is controlled by the rational element, then you are someone who is more contemplative, who seeks wisdom, and even other people come to you to ask for advice. If you're someone who is controlled by the spirited element, then you are the type of person who loves action. If you are told just to do something, you go and do it. So for example, if you're John, and John, I ask you to go beat up James, you'll just go and beat up James without even asking why. You're a man of action. Then, if you're controlled by appetite, you're someone who loves where there is a party, where there is a wedding, and every time you're always thinking about food, pleasure, and sex. He thinks that a good human being should be controlled by reason, should be controlled by the rational element. and that rational element should be supported by the spirited element, and the two, spirited element and rational element, should control the appetite, and appetite should be able to obey. If that happens, then we have harmony, and that harmony produces a good human being, and that good human being will be able to act well in society. It turns out that it's not easy to have a balanced soul. So in some cases, you will realize that while you want to have the rational element to be in charge, but you'll realize that sometimes it doesn't just happen like that. So you might find that ideally, if 50% controls maybe your rational element, and 25% is your spirited element, and 25% is your appetite element. Since 50% is the rational element, it's dominant, it's controlling the rest. Then this one supports this one, and then they subdue the appetite, and then you're a more balanced human being. But it turns out in some people, 50% could be the appetite, and then 25% is the rational element, and 25% is the spirited element. And so in that case, you are controlled by appetite. For such person, your soul, your animation, the preoccupation of your mind is always on food, pleasure, and sex. Once you have those things, you're satisfied. If you're also controlled, maybe 50% is the spirited element. You're a man of action. You just want to be where action is. In this case, you can think of goons or those security people who are around members of parliament. They are people of action. Sometimes they can be pushing people who are really important for that meeting, but since them they are just men of action, they will end up even beating up the person who their member of parliament or the person they are guarding was going to look at. So these are men of action. They're spirited. They're always just looking for some action. They don't use rational element a lot. But also, if you have rationality and you don't have anything in your spirited element, then you might not be able to also carry out what you're thinking. And you also need some of the appetite to be able to satiate your body so that you have energy to think. So for a good human being, you need your rational element to be the dominant, supported by the spirited element, and you also still have your appetitive element. But all these other two are controlled or dominated by the rational element. It turns out that most human beings are controlled by the appetite. And so for that reason, we have most people are easily manipulated because their instincts, their disposition is on food, pleasure, and sex. Plato also thinks that once we understand the soul, then we can also understand society. So we will understand society because the human beings who have souls are the human beings who make up society. So society is generally for Plato the total sum of souls. So like in Kenya, we have 50 million souls. And those souls, if we take the average of the souls, and you find that the average or majority of the souls are made up of the rational element. The rational element is the dominant. Then we will have a very smart population that always calculates, that's always deliberating, and they are wise. If we have 50% of the population is controlled by the spirited element, then we have a society where people just get into action without even asking why, and they can even get into problem. They're like the goons around members of parliament or dignitaries. But also if we have society made up of majority where their soul is 50% appetite, then we have people who are easily swayed with pleasure, sex, and food, and therefore they are easily manipulable. So according to Plato, society is generally like this. You can see from the human soul, we can map out into the society. And this is the pyramid for society. So in society, according to Plato, there are very few people who use rational element, and they are here. And he says these people are the ones who think for society. They are very few. Then we have another group that's relatively small but a little bigger, which is controlled by the spirited element. And then we have majority of the people are in the lower pyramid, and these people are controlled by appetite. So he thinks that the society has three classes: the class of rational people, the class of spirited people, and the people of appetite. The people who are controlled by rational element, he calls them philosopher kings. And the people who are controlled by the spirited element, he calls them the guardian or warriors. And the people who are controlled by appetite are the masses or the producers. He says that society is like this. And for a good society, just the same way, when the rational element was in control of the soul, if the philosopher kings are in control of society, then you have a just society. When you have the rational element controlling the soul, then you have harmony. You have harmony in your soul. But if the rational people are controlling the society, then we have a just society. Here, if everyone does what they are best at, so the people who are controlled by the spirited element, they do what they are best at, action. And so these are the people who form part of our security. They provide defense for the country. They man the borders and give us security. And some of them work in government as bureaucrats. So if you look at the attitude and behavior of people who work in government, they are people of action, people who can take orders. And once they're given orders, they will execute them with the spirited element. Then the philosopher kings are the people who are contemplative, who think about the laws, who think about government projects and government programs, and give orders to the spirited people to be able to organize society. But then the masses, who are in their millions, are people who should be provided for environment to work and produce food and other pleasures and just be happy. He thinks that these people, when they are allowed or given an environment to produce pleasure, they do not have any problem. And so, for a just society, the philosophers should be on top, the warriors should be running the bureaucracy, and the masses should be allowed to enjoy food, pleasure, and sex. And so, this is the theory of state or theory of society according to Plato. Now, I want to ask you, these ideas of Plato were written some years around 300 or slightly 300 and some years BC. BC means before Christ. It's been roughly 2,400 years later today. What do you think of Plato's ideas? Do you think that society is still organized in the same way? How wrong was Plato on his theory of the masses, that the masses just love food, pleasure, and sex? Think of how our politicians treat us, that when they come to talk to us, they're always talking about, vote for me, bei ya unga itashuka chini. Vote for me, we'll make alcohol accessible. Vote for me, we'll provide condoms. Doesn't that just mean that actually Plato, 2,400 years ago, had a theory of society that still works up today? Think of the spirited element. Think of when you have your experience when you go to see the bureaucracy, when you meet people in government, how they treat you. Don't you think that Plato had some insight on how the people who are working in government, if you look at the policemen, look at the government bureaucrats, don't you think that Plato was right? Then think of the philosopher kings. They are usually very few, and these people are very clever. They understand society, and they are able to organize it and manipulate. You might not like them, you might not think that they are clever, but somehow that they manage to rise on top, they do understand something. And that thing is how they're able to get on top there. Even if you think they do it through corruption, there's something that they do understand. So, think about it again. The theory of state, theory of the soul, and the theory of state, according to Plato. Would you disagree with Plato's idea? If you look at them from today, 2026 years later, or do you agree? Give me a comment. Tell me what you think. I hope you have enjoyed learning something from Plato about your soul and about the society. Thank you for watching. This was another video on philosophy's challenging ideas that I think everyone should know.